This guy is Eckhart Tolle, the biggest anti-fan of the ego. To him, the ego is just a bunch of illusions created by our minds. It's not something unique, powerful, or mysterious. But why he said that? Because when we identify with our thoughts, roles, or past experiences, we build a false sense of self. This mental image constantly seeks validation, fears rejection, and thrives on comparison. According to Tolle, that is the ego, not who we truly are, but a psychological mask. The problem with living through this mask is that it disconnects us from the present moment. The ego is always busy with stories about the past or anxieties about the future. It cannot exist in pure presence, which is why Tolle sees it as an illusion. Take my friend Sarah for an example. She's always anxious about her job title and how people see her at work. Every time someone else gets praised, she feels threatened, as if her value as a person's at risk. When a small mistake happens, she replays it endlessly in her head, worrying that others will judge her. Her sense of self shifts depending on whether she's being complimented or criticized. That self feels real to her, but real doesn't always mean it's helpful. If that work self helped my friend integrate better into the office, there would be nothing to discuss here, right? The thing turned out worse than that. That ego put Sarah under a lot of pressure and anxiety. It's nothing more than thoughts and fears looping in her mind, an image she keeps trying to defend. This shows how the ego operates as an illusion in everyday life. Up to this point, you'll probably feel a bit moved or shocked by what Tolle said. I understand that. His idea was so inspiring. But somewhere in your mind, you still object and say, he's deadly wrong. Perhaps the idea of ego is deeply ingrained in your subconscious, and everything has its basis. Let's step back a little. In Eastern traditions, the self has been debated for thousands of years. In Hinduism, the word Atman refers to the eternal soul, something unchanging that carries on beyond this life. In Buddhism, the opposite view appears with the teaching of Anatta, argues that the self is not a fixed entity, but a temporary collection of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. As you see, there has always been tension between seeing the self as real or illusion. Later, in the West, psychology shaped our modern understanding. Freud introduced the concept of the ego as the mediator between ID, also known as primal desires, and superego, also known as moral conscience. To him, the ego was functional, even necessary, to help us adapt to society. The culture, family, and education also play important roles. From childhood, we were conditioned to form an identity. In school, you were praised for good grades and scolded for mistakes. At home, you might have been compared with siblings or other kids. Slowly, you learn to tie your value to achievements, approval, and roles. That's how the ego becomes the filter through which we see ourselves in the world. Culture reinforces this even more. Society tells us who we should be: a good student, a successful professional, a respectable citizen. Advertisements play on our insecurities, saying we'll only be lovable if we look a certain way or own certain things. Social media doubles down, pushing us to craft a perfect image, to count likes and followers as proof of our worth. All of this feeds the ego until it feels like the most natural part of us. That's why it's so hard to accept what Tolle says. If the ego is just an illusion, then what about all the years we've invested in building it? Our resume, our social status, our reputation, they're all meaningless? This strikes at the very core of our subconscious, which has been conditioned to cling to the ego as though our survival depends on it. And that's the paradox. On one hand, the ego is just a story, like a bundle of thoughts, labels, and comparisons. On the other hand, it feels like the most solid thing in our lives because it has been reinforced from so many directions: survival, culture, family, and our own repeated habits. Think about it. Our ancestors needed a strong sense of me versus them to protect resources and survive. Without that primitive boundary, the tribe couldn't have functioned. Fast forward to today, and that same wiring still fires. The brain reacts to criticism at work or online almost as if it were a physical threat. The ego takes things personally because that's what it was designed to do. Once you hear that the ego is just an illusion, you can feel like a personal attack. It's not just an idea being challenged. It feels like you are being challenged. Let's come to a conclusion. Which side is correct? Eckhart Tolle's idea or our intuition? The answer is not about choosing a side. It's about recognizing the mechanism. The ego is a tool, a useful one. It helps you navigate the social world. But the fundamental error is identifying with the tool. You are not the hammer. You are the carpenter using it. You are not the ego. You are the awareness behind it. So the work isn't to kill your ego. That's just another ego-driven battle. The work is to gently, consistently disidentify from it. You don't have to believe the ego is an illusion. Just experiment with the possibility. See what happens when you stop taking its commentary so seriously. See ya!